Hello and welcome to another episode of Brave UX. I'm Brendan Jarvis, managing founder of The Space in Between, and it's my job to help you to put the pieces of the product puzzle together. I do that by unpacking the stories, learnings, and expert advice of world-class UX design and product management professionals. My guest today is Kanhika Nikam. Kanhika is a human-centered design researcher with over 12 years of experience helping organizations to solve challenging human problems. Although she's originally from Mumbai in India, in researching for this conversation, I came to think of Kanhika as a citizen of the world. Not long after completing her Bachelor of Design in Industrial and Product Design from MIT Institute of Design in Pune, India, her pursuit of knowledge took her to California after receiving a fellowship to study a Master's of Design at Stanford University and a scholarship for Stanford Business School. After successfully completing her studies in 2016, Kanhika worked as a design research and strategy consultant in the San Francisco Bay Area, consulting to organizations from Silicon Valley startups to industry titans, teaching experimental research to designers and facilitating design workshops for executives. In 2017, she moved halfway around the world again to Wellington in New Zealand. There's definitely a story there, where she's currently growing the practice of human-centered design at Springload, one of the country's largest digital experience agencies. As a practitioner, her work has been both challenging and interesting, including designing voice-assisted healthcare systems, prototyping, and testing new airplane cabin experiences, as well as developing educational tools for preschoolers. And that's just her day job. Kanhika is also an artist, mainly working through ethnography, performance art, and videography, where she encourages people to pay attention to the little things. She also dabbles in jewellery and ceramics. A fan of whiskey, tea, and chili flakes, and someone who is bursting with creativity, it's my pleasure to have Kanhika here to speak with me today. Kanhika, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brendan. I really liked your colourful description. It sounded like when you were talking about it, sounded like a quilted patchwork, of like different colours and pieces and places and experiences. A lot of flavours in there as well. The chili flakes, I like that.
Yeah, no,
thanks for that.
I definitely enjoyed researching for our conversation today, Kanhika. I think your background is just really fascinating, and I think it's going to be such a great conversation to have. And I always like to start on a serious note. So tell me, the whiskey, the tea, and the chili flakes, is that all at the same time?
No, that's not at the same time, but different parts of the day. Yeah, I do. My husband is American, and when we sit down to have breakfast, he'll have his toast with peanut butter and maybe like slices of banana. And I'll have my slice of toast with some avocado, salt and pepper, and chili flakes. He's like, how do you start the day with chili flakes? I was like, how can you not start the day with something like savory and spicy? So that's the morning. Yeah.
I love to see those cultural differences playing out.
Yeah.
Now, I know people that are really into chili occasionally will take their bottle of hot sauce or chili flakes with them to restaurants. Is that something that you also do?
Absolutely. I have my little first aid kit, and over the last year, it has the new additions have been a mask, a small bottle of hand sanitizer, but always in that little pouch is a small bottle of chili flakes. Yeah.
I love it. So you grew up in Mumbai, which is India's largest city. And for people that have never been there, myself included, I mean, that sounds very exotic. What is Mumbai like? What are the sounds and sights and smells that it brings to mind when you think of where you grew up?
There are just a lot of sounds and sights. So, it is almost like it can be quite overwhelming at times, but it's also there's so much of all of the sights and smells. And growing up, in school, I had friends. I went to a convent school, so I had from kindergarten to class 5. We used to we were in classrooms and we would say. We would pray in front of the cross as part of the convent. But then from class 5 to class 10, I went to a Zoroastrian school. So that was Parsi and Iranian led. So we used to pray to the Zoroastrian fire god. So, it was just like, and at home, I had my own spiritual, cultural practice from my family. So it did have a lot of diversity. All my friends came from like different backgrounds, different like schools of thought, different point of views. And if you go out on the streets in the city, not having grown up in Mumbai, you kind of do get a sense of that. There isn't like a cuisine of Mumbai really, although some people might argue from Mumbai, but it is really like that cultural like melting pot from across the country, but also being like a big city with a lot of industry. You also have a whole like expat culture from like people from abroad. So it's a really really vibrant and exciting. It's a city that never sleeps.
Hmm. It really sounds exciting. Definitely a place to visit.
Mm.
What impact is evident from British colonialism in the city still?
It has some really interesting lasting impact on the architecture in Mumbai. Mumbai has, I think, the second largest collection of Art Deco buildings after Miami, and it is beautiful. There's a lot of our transportation, our internal transportation system is a big legacy of the British. We have beautiful Gothic architecture, like massive railway stations, and all of that. Obviously the convent schools that I went to are a legacy of the British colonies. But interesting fact, before before the British colony, before Mumbai was a part of the British colony, it was actually a Portuguese colony, and there was a marriage between the Portuguese and the British, and Mumbai as a city was offered as a dowry to the British.
Wow, what a dowry!
The whole city. The Mumbai's old name is Bombay, which actually means I think the Bay of Good Hope, the little Bay of Good Hope in Portuguese. So yeah, it is quite multi-layered in that historical sense as well.
And of course, that name Bombay is immortalized in the famous Bombay Sapphire gin,
Yes,
I believe.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up in Bombay, so when people ask me, what is home, I'm like, yeah, Bombay, oh, Mumbai, yeah.
Mm. So before you went to Stanford, I hear that you traveled across India. What was it that inspired you to see your own country before heading overseas?
It wasn't a specific I guess a specific reason or a specific thing that led me to do that. It was more of like my family. My parents are very keen travelers, so I've been traveling within the country like since I was. There's a story that my mom tells me. Like when I was 2 months old, my grandparents picked me up and took me to travel up north in near Kashmir. Um, which is like a fantastic area of India. But yeah, I guess my family just really took me traveling to places. So I think that is part of my upbringing as such. Yeah.
Mm. So picking up on your upbringing, clearly you're a creative and very curious person. And I get the sense, not that I have spoken to you before today, but having seen you speak, that you have a very strong sense of self. What was your family environment like when you were growing up?
Both my parents come from a lot of creative backgrounds. So my mom's an architect, my dad's an interior designer. Within like my cousins and aunts and uncles as well, my auntie is a textile designer. My cousins are fashion designers. My grandparents. So when I was growing up, my grandfather he was in the police force in India. So he had just retired, and after retiring, he pursued a whole kind of like interest in fine arts. So even the people weren't in kind of the arts and creativity. They somehow did have that aspect, and I wonder why. Like, yeah, I don't know whether it's like in the DNA or but that was always like an influence. And I think a large part of that is also just growing up and spending heaps of time with my mother, being the only child. So I do have a sibling. I have a younger brother, but we have an age difference of 10 years. So for 10 years, I was the only child. So I guess I had to invent things to do by myself. Get introspective, create my own games and my own little universes. Of course, I had like friends and cousins and, the larger whānau as such. But the day to day, I think it was a lot of like looking within, looking into the abstract and like kind of, making your own adventures in your own little home. Yeah. So I think that did kind of fuel me in that sense.
Yeah, being an only child myself, I can relate to that. When was it that you realized that design and research was something that you really wanted to do?
It's a funny thing because I can almost like draw like a linear line looking back, of course, not looking forward when I was in the past, but my upbringing, like I said, was like quite inspired by a lot of crafts and arts. And when it came time to, make subject choices and decisions in school, like, what am I going to study? In India, you kind of, after class 10, that's the time when you make decisions. So you either go down the arts route, which is, social sciences and creative arts, or you go down the commerce route, which is accounting, finance, and then you have science, which is your, hardcore science. And I was partially interested in the sciences and arts, but arts was kind of more where I saw myself and my skills. So I did 2 years of high school just studying social sciences. I was like, oh, maybe I'll get into economics, become an economist. That was kind of what was happening. But what I did really like about economics was, the research part. Although it's not qualitative necessarily, but it's about like creating models and trying to understand behavior and like so that was something that interested me. But I think it was a lot about looking. I had like quite good mentors around me at that point in time. I had some family friends and like a mentor in my dad, where he's like, hey, what about this program in product design? I was like, oh, cool, product design. Does that mean I don't have to like read and write and give exams, like written exams? He's like, yeah. So, that really, really thrilled me because coming from that arts and crafts background, the way I problem solve was very tangible and physical rather than through written words. And so I think that really excited me. So I did kind of my undergrad in industrial design, but after graduating, my first job was, although to create a specific product, but I got more interested in the research, like why are we building the product we're building, rather than being in that product area. So that was kind of where I was like, okay, this research is really, really like where my skills lie. And it felt, sometimes when you do something and it comes very easily, you just feel like, yeah, this just feels like I'm not like actually making an effort to make this work. It's just happening. You're kind of in that flow state. And I was like, yeah, this research thing, this is cool. Let me get more into this.
And was there anything in the culture growing up as a female in India that shaped the way that you thought and the approach that you've taken to both design and research?
I guess I have thought about this quite a bit, and more so in the last few years, where I know like this is my happy spot for now. But like, why does it feel so happy? Why do I feel so? Why does this come naturally to me? And I think growing up in India as a woman, as a girl, or even like in Indian in most Indian families, I wouldn't say all because they're very, very diverse, diverse like microcosms. But in the family that I grew, there was always a hierarchy of the grandparents, parents, the kids, There's a lot of knowledge and respect that you show to the elders because of the experience they've had. And as a kid, I almost had like two worlds. One world wherein I could go explore all these things in my internal world, but in the world where I interacted with others, it was a lot about like listening to what they had to say rather than expressing. It was a lot about and I don't think it's necessarily a good or a bad thing. It was just what it was. But that did really actually fundamentally made me think of. It just made me a better listener. It just made me, it helped me kind of try like it got me better at connecting dots, between different information pieces. Yeah, and I think connecting it to the work that I do, like as a researcher, you are always trying to make the person, your user, or the person you're designing for the expert. So that did come very easily to me because that's what I was doing for a long time as a kid.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about a saying that I heard you mention in your UX 2020 talk, which was Atihi Devo Bhava. Hopefully I pronounced that somewhat correctly.
Almost, like 80% there.
I'll have to practice. But what does that mean?
If you literally kind of translate it, I wonder what Google Translate would say, but it means the guest is God. So it is in a way a lot of concepts around like hospitality, a lot of concepts around being gracious, being welcoming. It is kind of acknowledging that the home is a sheltered, comfortable space. And if you have someone coming from another space, you show them, you give them everything that you have. And there are beautiful many stories that go on to kind of explain this concept in a practical way. So you have like a lot of like fairies and like animals in the stories, like children's stories. But it kind of like really talks about like really offering everything you have to people. In one of the stories, this lady, she offers everything she has, these berries she has in her house to this guest, and the guest lands up being this god. So it's literally, you never know who is like walking into your house and what they might need. So that is kind of conceptually what that phrase means.
And what role does that play in your research practice?
That's an interesting one, actually. I haven't actually thought about it in my research practice, because in my personal life, it does mean like literally when we have like anything that comes into our house, if we, even if it is not just people that come into the house, if we purchase a new let's say a new pot for the kitchen, for example, it is there's behind me, there's this little shrine here. We bring the new anything to the shrine and just be like, thank you so much for being in our lives, be very grateful that I could afford to buy a pot. And then you actually start using it. So it's people, but it's also inanimate objects. You kind of welcome them into the house. But in the research practice, it is creating that safe space, right? It is about just making, because when people are sharing, giving you the gift of their experiences, sharing their experiences, their point of views, sharing what their values are in respect to what you're talking about. That's asking a lot of them, and of course, we have like research incentives and all of that, but more on like a human to human level. What are you offering upfront? So it is about trying to make the space as comfortable as possible. Just small little things like before you start with the interview, just checking in, be like, how is the day? Would you like a cup of tea or coffee? Just small things. I think it's really strange that that we have to kind of remind ourselves these things in the crazy fast-paced lives we live. We just kind of skip on some of these like really, really foundational, like really human to human things.
Yeah, and you do a lot of in context research, so I suppose bringing that principle or that practice into somebody else's environment is even more important than when someone's coming into your own environment.
Yeah, and like in practice, it could be very simple things as just bringing a small gift for them, just bringing some food, some kai, yeah.
Now, that saying that I mentioned was from the talk in 2020 that you gave titled "Is Bias Always Bad?" And you challenged a commonly held belief among researchers that they should be unbiased. What was it that gave you the idea for that talk?
Over the range of like kind of research projects I've done, there are some projects where it's a pretty simple, like unidimensional kind of project where it's a noble, like absolutely necessary project. Like how do we get our users to have a successful checkout experience on our website? It's very well defined topic. And it's kind of easy to kind of navigate your biases and kind of your what you're bringing to that. But then there are also projects which are, I guess, more multi-dimensional in the sense where you are kind of digging down into the layers. If you are looking at projects where we're hoping to get some like behavior change, either in like health or in like the addiction space, there are a lot of like underlying reasons why you are behaving the way we all do as humans, right? And I think what you start doing there is you try to understand the deeper motivations, what are the values that drive those motivations, and at that point you might realize that this thing that you're working towards it's not just, you're not just designing for someone else, but you are equally part of the solution that you're designing. And at that point, like, who is the researcher and who is the user? And that line gets like really blurry. So,
and when you realize that, what do you do?
You start thinking about what do you do. I mean, that's literally kind of, I think, what was my my trigger point to like kind of just take time, like regularly, or whenever I had some downtime at work, just like writing in my notebook, like, what does this mean, like trying to expand, like trying to think of like, how do I navigate between those lines. So and I think I may be wrong, but I feel like because I come from like applied research background, and not a lot of these things are taught to you in school, like in design school, which I think is a really missed opportunity, because the world is so complex and so like connected like that. But yeah, I wish someone had taught this to me in school. I wish there was like a subject, how to deal with bias or like ethics in design, and but unfortunately it wasn't something that was taught academically to me. So I had to kind of just go on my own own journey, and I think it's something that will evolve my kind of like my understanding about the topic over time.
And you came up essentially with your own framework for identifying your bias. Tell us a little bit about that.
I think you need to really be kind of understand for yourself who you are, what your beliefs are, what you how you see the world, to be then able to say, like, this is another person's point of view, and how that kind of sits underneath, on the side, in my worldview. And that, I guess, just understanding what your values are helps you understand what you're bringing onto the project, which might be yours. And then I guess you can then decide if it is something you want to actually bring onto the project and influence the project with, because I do believe that there is merit in that.
Let's talk about that, and let's talk about that in the context of the two categories of values that you identified, foundational values and heightened values. What are those two sets of values for the people listening? How do you describe them?
The phrase we spoke about earlier, the Atihi Devo Bhava. I've like that's something that I've grown up with, and it's something that's very deeply embedded in the way I behave, the way I am as a person. So it is a very very foundational value, and if I have to change it, it'll take me a really really long time to change it. So it's really embedded in me, right? And there might be other kind of values that people might have that they recognize are again deeply foundational. They've been something that they've been practicing for a long long time, and those, I think, if you want to bring on to a project where you see this project, the outcomes of this project not only affect your users but also you, and you want to bring in those foundational values to kind of push your project, influence your project, I think that's totally okay. But I think values are something that are always in flux. What you see around you, what you experience, that those they change your values. So for me, there are certain values which are, I guess, heightened, which are kind of, I'm still deciding, is this me or is this not me? They could be influenced by events or experiences that you have, and I guess these events or experiences, you kind of almost have to process it and understand what it actually means to you before you kind of use it to influence your work. And I think as researchers, that is that line I'm trying to understand. How much of myself do I bring in or not, and when is it important? When is it good or bad to bring that in? Because if I feel like if there is something that I haven't yet resolved, and an experience I haven't resolved, and I haven't like really said that this is a value that is foundational to me, it can be very tricky to navigate that on a project.
So often in a research situation, you'll be working within a wider team context, and people in the wider team will also be bringing their biases to bear in the work that you're doing together. How do you, as a group, as a team, identify your individual values in a way that's safe and enables people to share them with the wider group?
Mm. So there are two key things, like you do it in a group and how do you do it safely, because what we often, our biases cause assumptions that we make about people, right? So assumption is an output of the internal biases that we hold. And a very safe kind of a group, a safe activity to do in a group format is what we do is just an assumption dump, where we're in a team and we just literally just put out what are the assumptions we have about this specific project, this specific user, the person who we're designing for, and just put it out there. Once it's out there, it's not your bias or my bias. This is our bias as a team. Or these are, or I guess, like just labeling bias as assumptions also just makes it easier to work with, because assumption is like a very it translates very well in the research language, because from assumptions you can then create your research questions, right? So if all your kind of assumptions, your team's assumptions, are out there in the open, then we can kind of discuss, like, how do we mitigate these? Is there any desk research that says otherwise, about this specific assumption? If there is no research, then cool, let's actually just put that in our research session to actually say yes or no, is this assumption true or not? So I think that is still at a very high level, like at a very surface level, where we can start addressing some of the assumptions that we have, which are caused by biases. But I do think before you talk about your biases in a group format, I think it is an individual activity that you need to do by yourself, and it is something that you kind of need to kind of come in terms with it with yourself before you feel comfortable talking about it to your colleagues or in a group. And because it can be quite confronting, I've taken a couple of tests around what my implicit biases are, and when I've seen the results, I'm like, shit, is that who what my is that how I
I'm
see
a
the
bad
world?
person.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. Like you really need some time to actually come in terms with that. And the interesting thing about biases is that most of our biases do not change over our life. Which when I found out, I was like, oh my god, does that mean I can never change myself as a person? But being aware of what they are, like, then you can at least put some counterbalances in the way. Yeah. But yeah, I think you do need to do that activity or like whatever the thing is by yourself before you feel. And I think, as in like the team environment and working with teams, I think it is something that we can kind of gently guide people to do, because it is really, really important in the world we live in today, where we interact with so many different people from so many different point of views. And yeah.
Particularly for the outcomes of the project. And like you touched on there when you said you had done some work to understand your implicit biases, and you were somewhat horrified to find out what some of them were. People are being asked to be quite vulnerable, and I suppose I wondered how other people in the team might feel about sharing things that could potentially reflect poorly on them. So I imagine that there's an art in getting the team to a place where they're actually comfortable being transparent with each other and in a safe way, because they're not always complementary, the things that we might think about other people or the world around us. Part of the challenge with research is also to identify and understand the worldview of the participant, perhaps what their values are. Why do they do what they do? Why do they believe what they believe? How can researchers identify when a participant's worldview is being temporarily impacted by a heightened value? And does it even matter?
I can think of a specific research project for this example. When you ask people, so how is it that you do that thing? Can you tell me about it? People will be like, oh yeah, I'm really conscious about my health. I try to cook as much healthy food as possible. I try and buy fresh produce as much as I can, and that's really how I like to cook. And then be like, oh, can I actually would you mind giving me a tour of your kitchen? And at that point, we're kind of going through cabinets and like the fridge, and you see, oh, there's a lot of frozen food, like what? So you pose a question in a very respectful way. Oh, you said earlier that you like to get a lot of fresh produce. I see a lot of frozen food here. What can you help me understand what is happening here? And that's when you start to understand, like, okay, this person actually aspires to be in a healthy diet, eating fresh food, but the reality is, they have 5 kids, crazy job, zero time. They actually need to have all of their meals for the week prepped on the weekend. But that what does that say about the person? It's not saying that they're lying to us, but there's an interesting gap, or like an opportunity where this person wants to be a better version of themselves. This is the aspirational version, and this is kind of what their reality is, and this is their current sort of situation. And our job as like researchers is to help them figure out, like, what can we do to like close that gap between your aspirational you and your your current view. Yeah.
So it sounded like there that the foundational value was one of being healthy and eating healthy, but the heightened value as a result of work and life stress had modified the behaviour in such a way that they weren't necessarily living up to what they believed their foundational value to be. So you've spent the past 5 years or so outside of India. Kanika, how have your values over this time changed given the experiences that you've had since you left your country of birth?
Mm. Yeah, there's a lot of experiences have shaped, like have really like changed me over the last few years, more so than it's probably like, my foundational years, like, when you like really grow and become your person, you're like kind of pre-teens and after teens. I feel like I had a second burst of that. Yeah. And I think more so, I guess, living in New Zealand, I think family has landed up being somehow more important to me. Having a sense of community, those are all things that I feel that are my aspirational values. It's not something that I have in my life yet. Of course, I have a beautiful nuclear family: my cat, my husband, and my 3 chickens. But I do feel like a sense of like a grounding sense of community and family is something that's missing. And I think yeah, that's something still I'm working out how I bring into my life.
Hmm. Shifting gears and thinking about something on a sort of potentially more deeper and serious level, it's International Women's Day tomorrow. And as a person of colour and also a woman, what biases have you encountered in your professional life?
Mm. I in conversations with friends or at the bar, or in like a chill, I do get asked this question every once in a while. And I often ask myself, when have I felt uncomfortable by the way people see me because of who I am on the outside. And I don't know whether I've just been very lucky that I haven't had any experiences which make me feel marginalized or make me feel like I'm not part of the group in the room. Or then maybe I wonder, am I just very naive and, I just don't see, or I don't read people, or just assume, good intent. What is it? And the more I kind of think of it, I think it's probably just the way I see the world. Like growing up at home, my parents, they never like really treated me different because I was a girl child necessarily, which unfortunately can be the case for a lot of women in India. But I never had that. My father used to actually use the male name for a child. So you have bacha and bachi, which are 2 words in Hindi, which means child, but in male and female. But he used to call me the male version of it just for fun and like in a nice um, nice way. But so it never like really, I wasn't very aware of my gender as such, like me being a woman. When I used to look up at like role models or things that that people that I wanted to be uh, like when the internet became a big thing, I was all over Wikipedia. That was my like kind of um, window into the world and what's out there. What are the cool things happening? Who are the people? I still love reading. I still read like the people pages and look at what they're doing. But gender never like really stood out to me as such. Like it was just like, okay, here's this cool person. Here's what they're doing, and here's um, color sometimes did, and it was more of like an aspirational thing, like, oh cool, look at this cool person, and they're doing these awesome things, like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I could do that? So um I guess it's probably I just don't see that in my life, and I think that is my personal experience. As a woman of color, I don't see any difference in the way people treat me, but I do know that that is only one point of view, and people have very, very, very different experiences.
It really sounds like your parents set some excellent conditions for your childhood to sort of give you the environment to develop this sense of self and this confidence, and it's obviously served you really well. Speaking of serving you really well, you went to Stanford University, and this is one of the world's most respected universities. What led to the situation where you were awarded not just a fellowship, but also a scholarship to study there?
I often think it's like the world's like biggest loophole that I just got into. I think it is a very, very interesting program where, our cohort, every year they have like 15 to 10 people. The year that I went to, we only had 10 students. So it's a very tight-knit cohort. And I think it is kind of my previous kind of experience, because I did work before I had applied for my master's. So my work, and I think there was, like, looking back, there is a theme but like through all the different bits of my work around like education. And that, I think, like really, really came through strongly only when I was kind of writing my statement of purpose and, like kind of collating all of my work together to be like, what does this mean? I think it had a really strong point of view and what I wanted to do in life, which I guess was compelling to whoever was deciding whether or not to offer us the fellowship. But yeah, I think it's a great program, and it did really helped me think critically about my research practice, but also it really bolstered my art practice and my creativity, which I feel like not a lot of programs do both of those things simultaneously.
And how do those two things complement each other for you?
I think they're really essential pieces of who I am, and they almost cannot exist without each other. As my day job as a researcher, when I am like, I'm kind of being an empty vessel to gather people's everything, the stories, the experience that they have to offer to kind of help the work. But I feel like I don't have space for my thoughts and feelings and experiences. So my art practice is where I kind of just unleash all of that. But then again, it kind of helps to have a dedicated place where I can express myself, because I am expressing myself at work, but I'm not expressing those really foundational things at work, because I am giving that point of view to the user, to the people that I'm interviewing. So I feel like both of those really need to exist for me to be successful in my career as well as my personal life.
Sounds like your art fills you up with the energy to be able to do the research in your professional life.
And if you think of if you want to have a research career for a long time, you do need to think of how do you decompress, how do you where else can you kind of make sense of your own personal experiences and thoughts and feelings if it is not at work, because you are being unbiased, you're not bringing all of that to the work and project. So I almost think it's necessary if you want to practice research for a long time.
And there's a message in your art that you've tried to bring to the world. What is that message?
I think when I started making art, I was just making art for the sake of making, because that's what brings me joy. But when I looked at what I was trying to do, it was to kind of just look at what's in front of you, look at what's next to you, be present in the moment. So a lot of my artwork have like weird experimentary aspects to it, where I get people to just slow down for 5 minutes and like look into the space and then tell me about it afterwards. Or it has me like graffitiing like random parts of the city with just small cues for people to be like, hey, slow down, look at this shadow of this beautiful leaf here. Have you noticed it before? So
Mm,
I think, yeah, I do live at a pace where I feel like I get to kind of acknowledge the little things that nature or life has to offer, and I feel like I want to share that with other people. So my art is almost like prompts for people to be like, hey, this is a way that I see the world. Do you find it interesting?
And you did that quite beautifully in a piece called Musing the Mundane. Tell us a bit
Mm.
about that project.
Yeah, musing the mundane was I think all of the things that I do bring are built a lot on like my past experiences. Um, and musing the mundane, quite literally, was I just painted a room completely white, windows, walls, floor, furniture was like a big red couch was like upholstered in white, those white tables, chairs, everything. And I spent I think 2 weeks just drawing on all the surfaces, just very meditatively, like like repetitive patterns, things that you kind of you start with your hand but almost forget after a couple of minutes, and you just kind of get into that meditative mode. um, but I left it slightly unfinished. And then when the exhibit went live, when people were invited to actually step into this world, which was part blank canvas, to kind of just fill in and like kind of do those meditative things, but in a very mundane environment, in the environment that is a living room. It has the same couch, the same window that everyone has at home, but you're doing something very differently. I had like kids coming into the space, and they were like drawing on the couch and looking excitedly at their like parents. They're like, I never can draw on the couch at home. I'm drawing it here. Isn't this cool? But parents were like also doing that. It kind of just breaks you out from your day to day in like that physical day to day environment, which is your living room. But you do something different, a little more chill, relaxed, meditative. That
Mm.
was, yeah, musing the mundane.
And I believe it was inspired by a formative part of your childhood, and particularly your father's influence through his interior design. What was
Hmm.
it like having other people come into, albeit an abstract view of that, and contribute to that piece of art?
I think it felt very gratifying and encouraging in a way where, I have this very special part of my childhood memory, many memories strung together, and I've created this thing to show it to others. And, the fact that they're willing to engage with it and add to it it's a very personally, it's a very gratifying experience. Yeah.
Coming back to Stanford, one of the projects that you were involved with there was a truly wonderful educational therapy game for children who are hearing impaired called Rhombus Rumbles.
Mm,
I believe it received first place at the RESNA Student Design Competition, which is sponsored by the United States Science Foundation.
mm.
What was the problem you were trying to solve there?
There was there were problems around my education kind of thread came in here, where I was interested in looking at how do deaf children learn language. And there's heaps of scientific research that talks about the more words you're exposed to as a child, the better your language develops.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are a deaf child, you obviously have that disadvantage from day one, right?
Mm,
And so how do you kind of create other tools, or other tools in that age is toys, right? Which is so exciting. So how do you create these fun educational games that the kid can play, not just in therapy sessions, which like with like a speech therapist, because the research that I did for the project was part in India and then part in California,
mm-hmm.
and in across both, I guess the both parts of the world. If you are going to a speech therapist, you'd probably go to them like once or twice a week, and that's it. And if you have like a parent that's like working full time, who is actually going to play those games with you? So this was a game that you could play with people who have full hearing capacity. So you're kind of leveling the playing grounds for a deaf child and a child with hearing to play together. So even though you're not in a therapy session, even if you're playing a game with your brother or a sister or your friends or your parents, you still are learning those language skills. So that was kind of the concept behind the project.
What was the mechanic of the game?
It had like the first few words that children learn, and we selected words that are specifically like phonetic. So you have like words that you can like lip read. Then there are certain words that are produced slightly inside of your mouth. And that was kind of the levels of the games, level 1, the easy beginner level, was all the words that you could kind of see your lip making. And the kids had just prompts on tiles where you could, you had a bunch of tiles on the table. You could put as many tiles or as little tiles, and you're trying to almost lip say a word, and the other person is trying to lip read what you're trying to say, and those words are confined because it's not any word in the English language, but they're words which are on the table. So then you can add like a time aspect to it to get it like fast and speedy, or so it kind of just, even the child, or even the person who is not deaf can also play the game through lip reading, and it's kind of just a fun game.
When you were evaluating the game with the children, how did it feel to see them engaging with it?
Oh, that's the best part, isn't it? When you have gone through a couple of iterations and like, oh, is this gonna work? And so we kind of tested it at a play school, and we had one specific child who's very, very, very shy. And the child never like actually speaks much in the classroom, but when we kind of had the game with 4 other kids on the table, this kid was like going crazy with the game. He was like winning. He's like, yes, we got the word. He's like, it just goes to show that different people learn differently, and I think we just have to provide as many ways of as we can for kids especially, to learn and just bolster their confidence from a young age.
It's such a great example of the impact that some great research and some great design can have for people. Before we move to closing things out with some rapid fire questions and then take the show to its natural conclusion, I just wanted to touch on briefly one other aspect of your time at Stanford, and that is, I understood that you were mentored by David Kelly, the founder of IDEO, for your final thesis or your project within that. What was that experience like?
It was fantastic, but then again, there wasn't like necessarily a sense of oh my god, it's David Kelly. It's like, oh yeah, cool, it's David Kelly, It was really great because one thing, there was obviously one-on-one kind of feedback that me and my team got from David Kelly, but there was also like just so many interesting people he got into the classroom. We had like kind of like the top like human-centered designers in the Bay Area coming to our classrooms, and I was like, wow, like you just have a moment, like you're like, wow, am I really here? Am I like in the midst of these people, and they're just offering their time and giving me advice on my project. So yeah, I think it was really great. The one thing because we obviously had a relationship outside of the thesis project as well. And after working for like a year or so in the Bay Area, and I was trying to move to New Zealand, it was a big decision in the sense, at that point in time, at least, I was like, oh wow, I'm in Silicon Valley. It's where the things are at. remember this is a couple of years back.
I'm in the epicenter.
Yeah. And like, oh, should I be going to New Zealand? Like, why am I like, is this a good decision? My parents
Yeah,
said,
how did that come about? What a move to make from being in Silicon Valley to Wellington. And I'm from Wellington. And don't get me wrong, I love Wellington, but it's not Silicon Valley.
The thing is, I think I don't hold too much importance on things in the moment. And at that point in time, I was dating a dude who is now my husband, who moved to New Zealand and in Wellington. And we were doing long distance for a while. I was like, there's only one way this is going to work if one of us moves. So I just followed the love of my life to the other side of the hemisphere. And my parents at that point were like, what are you doing? Focus on your career. What is this? Typical Indian parents, like, oh, like, why are you following this dude? Some white dude.
Some biases coming out there.
yes. And at that point, I just went to David. I was like, what do you think? What it's pretty cool. Like, I'm working with all my friends here. Like, we used to do interesting projects. We used to just get a group of our friends together and like work on projects. So it was just a great time. And I was like, should I move to New Zealand? I'm not sure what it's like there. I've never been there. I've never traveled to New Zealand even. And he said, the one piece of advice he gave me, I still remember it every now and often, and it does kind of help me have confidence in my decision. It's like the further you move away from your home, because this is kind of like my home. It was my home. Where I did grow quite exponentially. The further you move away from your home, the more you learn, the more your skills will be valued. And I feel that every few weeks, I'm like, coming to New Zealand, I feel like I was bringing a different point of view to New Zealand. And I think that was valued, that is still valued, and that is part of what I bring to the table. But also I'm sitting with such talented people on the table who are not like me, who don't come from the same background as I do, and I have so much to learn from them. So it's such a great reciprocal thing to do at this point in my career. So yeah, that was the best piece of advice I got from David.
So not everybody can say that David Kelly's the reason why they got married.
Yeah, that is true. When we got married, I just put a post on Instagram, and David's like, "Congratulations!" And I was like, "Yeah, thanks for the intro." Because also my husband is. We went to the same program at Stanford, so David did pick both of us to be on the program.
So he was really instrumental.
Yeah, the matchmaker.
Are you up for some quick rapid fire questions?
Let's do it.
So these are scenario-based questions, and I'm just going to read them out, and then we're going to see what you say.
Okay, I'm a little scared, but let's see how we go.
Feel free to shake out any nerves.
Okay.
The first one is, you suspect that a stakeholder is bringing some unconscious bias to their assessment of the problem space. How do you help them to see that?
I would ask them what you've said, where is it coming from? Or if they've reacted in a certain way. It's like, what are you feeling right now for you to be reacting that way? Hopefully, and obviously not in a meeting environment, but in a more of a one-on-one, because that can then kind of just open up the conversation.
Yeah, that sounds really disarming, really smart. The next one is, you're interviewing a participant and they seem reluctant to talk freely with you. How do you encourage them to open up?
I would ask them, would you like a change of scene? Would you like to go for a walk instead? Would you like to hop into the other room? Is this room too stuffy? It may not be the room, but I think just literally changing environment might change things up a little bit. So maybe that's the first thing I'll try. And then if that doesn't work, I'll try something else and something else.
Gold, good place to start. Change the context. I really like that. The final one is you've designed a script to evaluate an experience that your team has designed. After the second of 5 participants, you realize that there's a problem with the script. What do you do?
So I have had this experience quite a few times, and the two things you kind of weighing is like, do you change the questions and then risk the data being all messed up, or do you kind of just like and then just like go ahead with the misleading question or whatever the question that's not working, or do you change it up? And I think it depends on what level of fidelity the thing that you're testing is. If it is like quite highly, if it's a high fidelity thing, I think it's okay to change things up a little bit, because you don't need a lot of, you don't need the number of participants to validate a certain thing. Which is quite highly defined. And hopefully you have gone through multiple rounds of testing before that. So you can have confidence in smaller numbers. So I think that's the point where I feel like I could switch it up. But if we are like testing something which is a little more conceptual, I think I'd still keep the question that seems like it's not working that well, because I know further down the line we would have the opportunity to kind of refine and get more of from that area, that question.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Mm.
That's the end of our rapid fire questions, and now just bringing us down to the close. Thinking about the field of design research in 2021 and the immediate years ahead, what are you most excited about?
A couple things. I think one is people in general are being really aware of the dilemmas and the harm that a lot of digital products can bring. And I think we as researchers no longer can be in that naive, innocent point of view. People, like when you go to research, we have sometimes people asking us questions, so how are you going to make this experience not addictive? And I think you do need that counterbalance to actually design and create something that is truly innovative and good. So I think I am excited to kind of like work with the challenging opposing force, and I think that's going to be really, really interesting navigating in the next few years. And we see it everywhere in all the different countries. It's what's happening globally. People are like more divided online than united, and people are starting to see why this is happening, and how the digital technologies are playing an adverse role in this. So I think it's going to help us to push our field to a better place than what it is currently. So I'm excited to be kind of part of that. I think in the next few years, I think the other exciting thing is people and organizations are being more aware and supportive of the big challenges that are in front of us, like climate change, for example. We even like 5 years ago, we didn't have that many people acknowledging or accepting or doing something actively about it. And it just feels like the time is ripe, stuff is happening, things are changing, and to be part of that, I think it's going to be really, really exciting.
Most definitely. There's some really important ethical considerations for the field, and clearly if we help to create it, we can also help to change it. Let's play a game.
Okay.
It's a pretty simple one. It's called What's the First Word That Comes to Mind? So I'm going to say a word. And
is this a psychoanalytic like test or something? After the test, I'm going to get some results.
I promise it's not. So I'll say a word and then you just tell me what the first word that comes to mind is. We've got 3 of them to go through. The first one is bias.
Humans.
Mumbai.
Sensory overload in a good way. That's not one word at all.
Oh, it doesn't have to be one word. It can be anything.
Okay, cool.
And the final one is whiskey.
Ooh, ice.
I see. If you could get a message out to all of the girls growing up in India today, what would you say to them?
For me, it was really important for me to have many mentors and role models in front of me. And that is not something that everyone has. But I think I would urge girls, women in India to look at women around them in unsuspecting roles who may not be a role model or a mentor at the first go, but look at our grandmothers, look at our sisters, our mums. You know, they are really strong, really resilient women. You know, they have over their lives, they've like created such beautiful families, supported such great children, and that in itself is not a small task. The foundational, I think, skills that 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 are needed to kind of have like a successful career, you know, is not very different from running a successful household, running a loving, bringing up loving children, bringing up children that are confident about themselves and are just good humans. That is, I feel like you would need more skills and work to work towards that. So I would urge girls to just look at, you know, look at other women and support them and get inspiration from them.
Such an important message. Kanika, it's been a truly insightful conversation today. Thank you for so generously sharing your knowledge and experience with me today.
Thank you, Brendan. Yeah, your questions were really, really interesting as well. They've gotten me to think about different parts of what I do and who I am, and I always appreciate that. Thank you so much.
No, it's my pleasure. And for people that are interested in connecting with you, finding out a bit more about what you do, what is the best way for them to do that?
Just reach out to me on my email, which is my first name, Kanhika, Kanhika @gmail. That's, yeah, I'll get back to you at some point.
Sounds great. We'll be sure to put those details in the show notes as well as a link through to your website. Thanks, Kanhika. And to everybody who's tuned in, it's been great having you here. Everything we've covered today will be in the show notes, including, as I mentioned before, where you can find Kanhika, including any resources that we've mentioned as well. If you enjoyed the show and you want to hear more of these great conversations with world-class leaders in design, UX and product management, don't forget to leave us a review and to subscribe to the channel. And until next time, keep being brave.